Greetings everybody, this is Bea Harper from supermarcy.com and I want to tell you something about me. When I go swimming, and when I get out of the pool, all sexy like, I wipe my body with Clint Eastwood's face. Don't believe me? Let me show you. Wow, wow, wow. Alright, so you can probably guess what movie I'm going to be talking about today. Sergio Leone's seminal western, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. And I don't know why I slurred Sergio Leone's name, I swear I'm not drunk. But look, what hasn't been said about this movie? It is a classic. It has its detractors and they're well within their reason to feel that way. But come on. When you think of a western that is not John Wayne or you know any of those sorts of really clean American western movies, what do you think of? You think of Sergio Leone's brutal, gritty, and just fucking majestic spaghetti western films. There is something so endearing about this movie that it is so difficult to really put a finger on it. For one thing, all of Leone's films have a sense of brutality and anger and a sensation of death about them, but at the same time, they're majestic, they are regal, and there's a real sense of pageantry. Granted, every one of his characters aren't necessarily complicated, but their brilliance doesn't come from the more human element, it comes from the archetype. The way I think about characters in Sergio Leone's westerns are this. They're like Greek heroes, Hercules, Perseus, Ulysses, Odysseus. All of these individuals aren't necessarily defined by their personality per se, but by what they do. So for example, the character played by Clint Eastwood, aka Blondie, aka Joe, whatever you want to call him, the man with no name, even though he's called the good in this film, he's actually more morally ambiguous, but when you compare him to the bad and the ugly, played by Lee Van Cleef and Eli Wallach, respectively, he pretty much comes off as the hero. He comes off as the Jason from Greek mythology. With Angel Eyes, played by Lee Van Cleef, the bad, he is definitely one of the more villainous characters from Greek mythology. He's like, you know, say Poseidon or something. Yeah, fucking asshole. And then you had the character of Tuco. And Tuco somewhat reminds me of a satyr. He's like one of those guys who just enjoys eating and getting drunk and all the baser pleasures of life. But at the same time, he has a huge sense of maliciousness about him. He's like a malicious child in a few cases. So I'm not going to give you the whole sort of blow-by-blow rundown of this movie because quite frankly, you probably know it all already. But here is my personal experience with this movie. So when I was about 14 years old, I was very curious by this video cassette on my father's shelf called The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. So I asked him what that was, and he said, oh, it's a cowboy movie. And I'm saying, oh, okay, can I watch it with you? And he said, all right. He was probably curious as to why his prepubescent daughter wanted to watch a Western movie, but yeah, whatever. So when we sat down and watched it, I gotta confess, I wasn't necessarily into the movie, but one thing I really did like was just how it looked. I hadn't seen a lot of Westerns by this point, so I didn't really have a measurement to apply to. But when you think of John Wayne, you think of John Wayne films as a little more clean. Yes, they have their charms about it, but when it comes to just downright brutality and viciousness, that's where Sergio Leone's movies really come into play. When you think about the Old West, you think of times that are hard. It is so difficult to be a human being back in those days, you know, much less a woman. Now that's another thing about Sergio Leone's movies. A lot of people say that his films are misogynistic. I don't believe that. Yes, it has some serious damage being done to the female characters, and I'm not about to say that this is a good thing, but they don't portray these scenes of violence and whatnot in a particularly positive light. When a woman is being beaten, you're not supposed to be cheering. Okay, you are being struck by how offensive and terrible these actions are. And that's what Sergio Leone does. He elicits an emotional reaction out of you, even if you don't necessarily intellectualize it, it strikes you. It strikes you in the heart and it strikes you in the mind. It's almost instinctive how his movies tend to be emotionally resonant. So going back to the whole sort of female characters in Sergio Leone before I go any further, one female character that pretty much defies whatever sort of counts of misogyny that Sergio Leone had against him was the character of Jill McBain from Once Upon a Time in the West, played by Claudia Cardinale. Now, rest assured, I am going to review that movie a little bit down the track, so I'll get further into her role. But saying Sergio Leone's films are misogynistic are ridiculous. So I want to say that right now. They are ridiculous. So going back to The Good, the Bad and the Ugly itself, look, every one of these characters stand for something. There's really nothing complicated about them. But what truly draws you in are the actors. Clint Eastwood, Lee Van Cleef, and Eli Wallach. They all embody their roles. You're not necessarily just looking at actors like putting on cowboy outfits and whatnot. No, you're seeing actual guys in the West who are trying to make something of themselves. And each of them don't necessarily have a noble cause. But that's the thing. The fact that, Eastwood is not a hero in the traditional sense, it just makes him far more intriguing. Now, that's not to say he is a total prick. In fact, there is this wonderful scene in which, something quite pivotal happens. It's basically when this bridge is blown up during the war, and he approaches a dying soldier. This soldier is beyond help, alright? So Clint Eastwood looks down on him and, offers him a drink from his water skin, and the guy takes a drink, and then he dies. And it's just a real sort of almost chivalric act on Blondie's part. He doesn't know this man, but Blondie just is completely opposed to this war. Yes, he's doing it, he's doing what he does out of opportunity because, when the war is going on, you can do whatever you want, basically. But he still makes the time to show a sense of decency. Whereas the character of Angel Eyes, he is a downright cold killer, but he's not an idiot. Everything about what Angel Eyes does is premeditated and calculating. He doesn't go into anything half-assed. He intellectualizes these things and he thinks. And, truth be told, he is a guy who will follow his job through. Even if you pay him, more than what his original donor put in, he is going to finish his job. And it's just, Angel Eyes is one of my favourite villains of all time. There is really nothing much to him other than the fact that, Van Cleef is putting all these wonderful mannerisms into his character. For example, those eyes of his eyes are like that of a reptile's, very sort of narrowed and just looking at you. He's figuring you out. That's what Angel Eyes does. He's able to look into a man's soul and see what's within it. It's really, really cool. But of course, my personal favourite character in this movie is Eli Wallach as Tuco. Tuco is pretty much the everyman in this movie. And even though he does some really terrible things, and he's a total selfish dickhead, he's still really, really funny because Angel Eyes runs on a sense of, intellectual instinct, and Blondie, he revels in a sense of, knowing what men want. But Tuco does everything he does in his own self-interest. He's like a little animal. He is an animal who runs on his own sort of personal instincts. It's either fight or flight or me or them. That's pretty much what Tuco is all about. But what makes him so endearing is the fact that he is pretty damn funny. When he isn't trying to hurt other people. When he and Blondie working together with the, the hangman thing, Tuco's usually the one who gets caught, even though they kind of alternate between their roles. One, gets caught and the other one saves them at the hanging. And whenever Tuco is about to get hung, they have to read out all of his full name, and it's a hell of a long name. And there's one moment in which Tuco locks eyes with an elderly woman in the crowd who's going to watch him be executed, and he goes, and the old lady's like, ah! It's those little moments that are brought forth and made more apparent by the actors. Every one of the actors are perfect in this movie. The three principals, I can't think of anybody else who could have done a better job. That is what this film is all about. It knows its strengths and it has all the appropriate pieces in place to make a really, really good movie. It's long, it's sprawling, and at times it can seem a little drawn out. The director's cut of this movie it would clock in about 4 hours. 4 hours long, and you know that 3 hours is kind of pushing it when it comes to an epic. So I can understand why they cut those scenes out, but in another sense, every one of these scenes always have a sense of mysticism about them. It's like, you know, Legends of the West. This was when the Wild West was still quite wild, right? So there's a lot more, you know, battles being fought here. But when you think about it, you know, from a modern day perspective, the Wild West is like ancient history to us. And with ancient history comes a sense of romanticism. We look back on these times and we speculate and we make them romantic in a way. You know, humans versus nature, like colonizing and, you know, fighting and everything like that. Even though that the Wild West was built on violence and hatred and intolerance and all that sort of stuff, we always seem to like focus on something positive, or we try to make something negative positive, and that's what the good and the bad, and the ugly does. Like, it shows you ugliness, but at the same time, it is beautiful. It's really, really curious. Getting briefly onto the themes of this movie, well, it's pretty obvious. Greed is a driving force of human nature. You and I can't deny that. But it's also, you know, some of the smaller things we do that make a difference. Blondie, despite his amoral nature, he still has moments of true decency, and he has a soft spot for kittens in this movie. It's kind of cute, and yeah, it's when it comes to just like showing you the basest parts of human nature, the good, the bad, and the ugly show you that. It is so viscerally powerful. The way it's filmed, it is so beautiful. You're basically looking at a dead landscape of sand dunes and like cracked, drought-ridden vistas. But at the same time, it's so surreal in how Sergio Leone is able to frame it. He liked to favour like sort of wide shots just to give you the whole entire picture of what you're looking at. And then he would focus on, you know, really intense moments of violence. But the thing is with violence in this movie, it is so quick. It's what really makes it unbearable, what makes it so tense is the lead up to it. The final Mexican standoff between the three leads is one of the best. They're in the middle of a cemetery, a place of the dead, and they are looking for this cache of gold. All three of these guys have been looking for wealth, and they aren't afraid to go into the underworld in order to get it. That's how I looked at it. You're looking at these three mystical figures going into the metaphorical underworld to get what they want. And it's just so fitting that this fight, this gunfight, or rather the shootout, it takes place in a cemetery. You really couldn't go for a better place to die. I know that sounds morbid, but that's the poetry of that scene. It's just so wonderful. Oh, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the music by Ennio Morricone. Ennio Morricone is a fine orchestrator. He knows how to score a film. And when he and Leone work together, it's just some of Morricone's best work. Now, that's not to say anything else he's done has been horrible. Not at all. But when it comes to the score of this movie, I mean, how could you not recognize bow, bow, bow? Every one of those notes in that theme, you know, signifies the characters in this movie, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And, you know, and just how it's formed. Like, they have human voices and animal sounds and woodwinds and all that sort of stuff. It's just such a powerful, electric score, and it just grabs you. It just reminds you of what sort of movie you're watching, and it's just so good. It's a beautiful and brutal and cruel and vindictive movie, but at the same time, that's what makes it so gorgeous. It's not afraid to be unflinching. It's not afraid to delve into the uglier parts of human nature. And when you are faced with something like that, it makes it easier to accept. Even if it's been very romanticized, but hey, this is a movie, and this is as far as we know, a fictional story. So I'm sure we can make those types of allowances here. So The Good and the Bad and the Ugly, 5 out of 5. I really have nothing else to say about it, because quite frankly, I would be talking, I would be mentioning what you already know. So that's it guys. That's my review of The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. I'm sorry it's been so slapdash, but this is what great cinema does to me. It leaves me speechless. It leaves me crawling for words. It's just a really damn good movie. Peace out.